Hello, hi guys.
I wonder what tech error we're going to make today.
Oh, we're not going to make any tech errors. We've got it covered.
Not unlikely.
Cameras on, guys. We'd love to see you. Make us big. There we go. Ooh, that's big, isn't it?
Yeah, don't like it.
Yeah. Just letting everybody in. Let the sound do the thing that it does.
I look like a chessboard.
Good to see everybody. Yeah, there's a fair few of you there. Some familiar faces, some familiar names. Hello, hello.
Yay. Hey, Gordy. How you doing?
David, how you doing? You're out and about. We like that.
David's one of our sourcing renovation managers. He's in his van. Means
Which
business.
is where you should be.
Means business.
You can't hear us.
You can't hear us. Yeah. Cool. Right. So, Lauren, you're going to keep your tabs on the waiting room. Mm-hmm. And usually there's people just tend to join a bit late, don't they? What should we do? Should we
give it a second?
Give it a second. Let everyone get in.
Yeah, everybody settle
Hopefully
down.
You can all hear us.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds
right. Okay.
And when you make gallery view, it takes off.
We will get going very shortly, guys.
Yeah, give us a minute.
Understand a lot of people are at work and stuff, but if you can pop your camera on to say hi, please do.
3 minutes.
Right. We got any slides, or are we just going to talk?
Well, we took the decision a couple of weeks ago to reduce the number of slides. I've got 3. Simple reason that we know that lots of people are at work, they listen to this as a rerun or on YouTube, or we're going to start putting it out as a podcast as well. So making it as verbal as possible is a good idea. And yeah, there's a couple of slides, but that's it.
Nice one.
Stops it being death by PowerPoint as well then, doesn't it? So today's title is the North East a buy-to-let hotspot? And it'll be put under there, brought to you by us, and we just happen to have property sources in the North East. We've got one on the screen now on the call, so we'll speak to you later.
So it's not nah.
So no, it's not. So yeah, we've got to fess up a vested interest, of course. But there's a reason we're there, and we want to talk about it now. We're in other places. And an alternative title for this, in fact, actually, I think on some of the stuff that went out, it was, is the North East right for you?
Yeah.
Right for me?
A lot of people get worried it's very far away to them.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people we speak to live down south, so for them it feels a long way away.
Yeah.
But
shall we?
I think it is.
Shall we talk really quickly? So there are a couple of slides, and I'll ping them up because it sort of shows you where our thought process lies. So this is what we would consider a buy-to-let hotspot map, and we'll talk about what makes a hotspot in a minute, but I'm telling you that's where we buy. There are areas we buy, areas we don't buy, areas we used to buy and now we don't, and it's what we consider a hotspot is different to what other people might consider a hotspot, but we've definitely changed our areas. We've had to move with the times, as it were. And then another slide, and we'll put this in the chat, Lauren. I know that you're probably saying I didn't tell you could do that, but you've got that slide somewhere, I'm sure. Now, they are the 4 main areas where we buy. They're very broad. You're North East, Yorkshire and the Humber, West Midlands, East Midlands. You might put the North West on there as well.
Yeah.
So breaking it down into the
this data
locations.
was off Zoopla, by the way. We didn't just make this up.
Yeah, of course, yeah. This is Zoopla data, and we're going to talk about what data means later as well. But clearly, if you look at the yields, and don't get too hung up on those yields, we're going to beat those yields massive. That's all houses in the whole of those areas. Yeah. And each one of those broad regions is broken down into a location, and later on we're going to break it down in maybe a little bit further as well. But you can see that the North East comes at the top in terms of yield. Now, if you were to rank them in a different way, it would come at the bottom in terms of maybe rent levels. Rent levels are going to be lower.
Maybe.
Capital prices are lower. So we're talking about an area where houses are a bit cheaper, rents are a little bit less. If you want a track record of capital growth already having started, then that track record it has started.
Definitely, that's the only reason we.
Yep, but it hasn't been going. It's not a train that's been going for the last 5-10 years.
No,
it's probably 5 years actually.
Which is,
but not the last 20.
Which is why it's a good time.
Exactly. So I wrote down here as another alternative title or a thought-provoking little comment. Do you wish you could have bought in 2000, 10 years ago? And I know I certainly
In
do.
where?
Well, that's the thing. For me, it would have been, if you said 20 years ago, it would have been Northampton.
Or London.
Or London, yeah. If you said 10 years ago, it would have been Nottingham. I bought a lot of houses in Nottingham 10 years ago, and I'm really glad I did. But I could not repeat
For
that
today's
ever.
northeast prices, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. One of the really I'm going to take that slide down now because
Andy has just joined the call. He's bought a house for a client this week. 34 grand.
£34,000, which sounds incredibly cheap. I don't know many places in the country where you'd still be able to do that. I used to buy houses in Northampton for similar money, in an area where people would say, "Oh, God, are you really buying there?" It wasn't the worst area, but it wasn't the best area. It's where the kind of places we buy now. And in terms of areas, like you look at the house. I mean, not the actual physical location. You know, you can go from one town to another town and find the area. They all look very similar, the same demographics, all those kind of things. And similarly in Nottingham, used to buy 30, 40 and £50,000 houses. Now, if that's not for you, fine. It might be that you're wanting something a bit more expensive, a bit bigger. Absolutely fine. But it's worth having this conversation.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
I've got a client who he's not even bothering to do this. Join the webinar this week.
Yeah.
He only wants the East Midlands, and he wants the end value to be more than 150k.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yep. So this is a webinar for those people interested, and we'll get a bit of in-depth in the actual areas. We're going to speak to people on the call as well. If you wish you could have bought in 2010, 2014, I think that, for me, this is the area. It's quite an innovative strategy, and we put that in a couple of the marketing bits of Blur, because honestly, if you do this, you will be in the minority. This is set to become one of the booming, biggest buy-to-let hotspots, 100% for sure. You can see the way the data's going. But you are...
Take a drive around some of those areas, the regen and the sort of investment and everything.
Yeah.
There's we couldn't believe it, could we, when we last went up?
No. So when I first moved to Nottingham, which is 15, 16 years ago now, comparing what it looks like now to what it looked like then, it's massively different. And the thing that was noticeable when I first moved there was the amount of old buildings, wasteland. It wasn't looking great. And there was also a stop-start kind of development going on all across the city. You'd find places where they'd wanted to redevelop it, but then somebody had chickened out, or the financial crisis had happened, or so there was boardings and hoardings up.
Tons of new build stuff has gone up, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
The new build estates in places, that's a big thing.
Fast forward, so when I first moved, it was, sites were derelict, hoardings were up, and then they'd fallen down. So they'd been derelict for so long that the site hoarding had fallen down, and nobody had got the investment. And then 10 years into when I lived down here, you'd start to see things happening. And then, 5 years ago, there was cranes everywhere, and now it stopped. You couldn't buy. There's not much room left in that bit where there's still quite a bit, but it stopped. Going back to the northeast, it feels like that. You go through areas where it's a wasteland, some of it. But if you then do a bit of Googling, it doesn't take a lot to find out that site has got earmarked for X, Y, and Z, and there's going to be, David Wilson Homes or Persimmon are going to be putting 2,000 houses on this area and that area, and it feels like the confidence. You'd be in early if you're invested in the northeast right now, but it's already started. It's not like you're in before it's even started. It's going now. So I think now is the time. Should we talk a little bit about how we choose our hotspots generally? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, why not?
So all of them, East Midlands, West Midlands, Yorkshire, Humber, North East, what aren't they? What are they? Why are we in those areas, Adam?
Well, we're always looking to stay ahead of the curve, really. We once it's been spoken about in the Times or something, it's gone, hasn't it? People say to me all the time, I've been reading all about Nottingham. But we don't buy much parts of Nottingham anymore because you can do better. if you've got a sizable chunk of cash that you want to invest, 150k plus, and your focus is on a good ROI, you're going to get more. You're going to get return on investment. You're going to get more in the more north you go now. And so we identified these areas as we were finding it more and more difficult to make the deals work in these Midlands 5 or 6 years ago. We moved into South Yorkshire then, when the prices in South Yorkshire are what the North East prices are now. In the areas of South Yorkshire that we bought in, we were buying those 30, sub 40k, no stamp duty prices, weren't we? And you've got a habit of, I noticed this, and it's not just with property, it's everything. Someone tells you can't do that or don't do that, that's a silly idea. You look for a way to prove them wrong, right?
It's not always right. It's not always the right thing to do.
It's
not always the right thing to do.
But so we'll say, right, okay, maybe you're right. So let's have a look then. And there are parts of South Yorkshire, just like there are still parts of the East Midlands, where we wouldn't go. But I know, because I've seen what's happened in the capital growth in the terms of the East Midlands, and I've seen it happen in the last 5 years in the parts of South Yorkshire. We can't buy the houses in some of those streets anywhere close to what we used to buy them for, but they still work as deals because they're going up in value still. But I can't remember last time we bought a 40k house in South Yorkshire.
No,
you can go and get one
5 years ago.
There's places you can still go and get them. We don't want to be in them.
We don't want to be there.
Same way in the northeast, we only want to be in the right spots. That's why we've got guys like David and Andy who have joined us today. We'll get them on, get them talking in a bit. They're property investors, they're contractors, they know the area, they're local. When you hear them speak, they're not putting on that accent. They know that area better than we do. Just like we know the East Midlands better than them. You need the local knowledge.
You need the local knowledge when it comes down to it. So I think there's some general principles to take out of this in how we find what we define as a hotspot. And what we define as a hotspot is sometimes the polar opposite of buying London would be somebody's idea of a hotspot.
Yeah.
Actually, probably not so much anymore, but definitely 5 years ago, it was like, well, look what's happening to capital growth.
I'm sure the people with millions and millions to invest will be going, let's buy in zone whatever it is, or exactly. this is the next bit of London that's getting a connection to the city. Let's get in here and spend 300 grand on a house or something like that. I don't know.
But I think as a general principle, there's a levelling up, there's a de-Londonification, there's that going on. In order to get a better yield, and one of the first things we always look at, Adam mentioned return on investment a minute ago. We're going to talk about return on capital employed a little bit later on, but the measurement before that, the sort of raw measurement, would just be yield. Now, yield isn't the be all and end all, and that sounds absolutely crazy for a property investor, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But actually just going, look, we've got a 5% yield versus a 10% yield, isn't it? You've got to what house, how are you getting it, what's the capital growth, where's the return on capital employed, all those things come in later. But yield is the first thing you look at to choose an area, isn't it? London versus
their main focus.
It's got to be as well. It's the thing that identifies an area worthy of consideration.
Sure.
So as a general principle, the further up north you go, the higher yield goes. It's a general principle. Of course, you'll find pockets where that's not true. And then when you're looking at a region, and that's why we break this down into the UK, then regions, then locations, and then we'll talk about the street, the house, and after that it actually comes down to how you've looked after the house, what condition it's in, the tenant, and the long-term management. That's sort of the tapering, and you get the absolute best by maximising all those things. But at a regional level, you've got to find the right area, and there are. Adam's talking glibly about £40,000 houses. There are £40,000 houses. I wouldn't say all over the place, but in lots of other places. Yeah. But we wouldn't buy them. £40,000 house is a cheap house in anybody's money. But if it's just worth £40,000, it's not cheap.
No.
And it's totally possible to buy a £40,000 house that's worth £40,000. That's not cheap. You want to buy a £65,000, £70,000, maybe a £80,000 or £100,000 house for £40,000.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do.
Because you're going to do a renovation on it.
Correct.
And bring it up to value.
Correct.
Exactly.
So generally speaking, if you're looking at that idea that in the UK there are regions, and some of them are hotter than others, or got better yield than the other. The up north, the better. And then in the northeast in particular, there are areas where you can really pick out some real sweet spots. Always we talk about the areas 1 to 10, 10 being Manhattan and 1 being the Bronx, and you never want to be buying in the 1s and the 2s. And in the 1s and 2s in these areas, they're not sellable. I mean, they're 30,000 pounds. They're a wreck. It's falling down. So just to give you a bit of context there. So yeah, that's how we find those areas and zone in on those areas. So I've written down here, avoid the ones that are too cheap.
Definitely.
We're going to talk about the actual makeup of the kind of houses that we're looking for, because I think that's the constant that, what is it that we're looking for in the areas. Maybe we should bring the guys on in a minute and talk about that as well.
Yeah, we're looking for, you say all the time, the right house on the right street, but that means, what that really means is the house that's going to have the largest tenant profile and rental demand, that's easy, safe and steady. Anyone local wants to live there. They don't say, oh, wouldn't live on that road, but I'd live half a mile around the corner. It's that.
Yeah. So we're looking for a particular kind of house, and whether we're buying it in the East Midlands, the West Midlands, Yorkshire, they are all remarkably similar. You're driving around and you take a video in one area, another area, and they're 300 miles apart, but you couldn't tell the difference. Maybe the colour of the stone on the buildings is slightly different, or the colour of the bricks, but other than that, they are remarkably similar.
Everywhere's looking at it. When we went to Barnsley the other day, didn't we? We went for a little day trip.
Yeah.
Just like, well, you just drive there. Oh God, everything's the same. All the same businesses in the same out of town shopping centres and then all of it. And then you get down the Terrace Street Road, they all look the same. They were all built in the same era. You can just pick that house and put it anywhere.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we think the Northeast is a hot spot is because when you imagine that picture of looking down a terrace street in the Northeast, and you're looking down the terrace street in, let's say, Barnsley, and then Nottingham and Northampton. They all look very similar. The one thing that always strikes me is the guy that gets out of the car, and I think I did a video, I've done more than one on this. Guy gets out of the car at the end of the day, and he carries his Sainsbury's shopping bag into his house. Just every day. It's happening all up and down the country. The striking thing there is wherever he works, the salary is probably very similar. There's definitely a London weighting, but yeah, in all of these similar salary. The car he's driving doesn't matter where you bought it; it costs the same from the Ford or Vauxhall dealership. The clothes he's wearing came from wherever they cost the same. The same shopping cost exactly the same. It all is the same, apart from the value of the house. He walks through the front door, and actually, do you know what? The front door costs the same if you had to replace it. The carpet costs the same.
Yeah, the television inside
everything costs the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the house, one is worth £250,000.
It's mad. It doesn't make any sense.
The one in Nottingham is worth 200. The one in Barnsley is worth 150, and the one up there is worth 100. And it's as simple as that. That doesn't make sense, and there's a disequilibrium. You've got David Wilson Homes around the corner building a brand new house and selling it for 200. It pulls all the prices up. So the reason we think Northeast is a hotspot is not just the yield's good and it's going to work for you, but over and it's coming to be the medium term now, the short, near to medium term. We're not talking about a long term thing. You will see, and you won't hear a lot of people saying this, the biggest capital growth in those areas, and quite a lot of people are saying, these are really cheap houses, are they ever going to go up in value? Well, at the point when you start to see them taking off, that's when they'll go up, and that's why we call it a hotspot.
It's like it goes down to the right house on the right street. When we were out the other day, we were in one of the houses that we're renovating, I know that house cost 65 grand to buy, right? And you had to turn round because we'd gone past it. You took a left.
Yeah.
We were 150 metres away from the house, and it was a little row of new build, detached houses. And we saw a Tesla, a Porsche, some other fancy car in the driveway to those houses. Went back onto this terrace street where there's obviously no parking. There's our 65 grand house. It's going to be worth about 100 when it's done or something. That's how you know that's a good investment. The local person who sourced that.
Yeah.
That's one of the factors why that was a great deal.
Yeah. We'll come back, but I want to talk, when we get guys on, we want to talk about specifics. No, we don't need to get really, really area specific. It's just the idea of, give us a feel of where, what the areas feel like, where you're buying, what kind of houses when we bring the guys on. But yeah, that idea that if we're talking about the areas 1 to 10, we don't buy in areas 1 and 2. We like to buy in areas 3, 4 and 5. Up in this area, maybe you can afford more 5s and 6s. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
But if you're buying in an area 3 and it's surrounded by 2s, that's the wrong thing. If you're buying in an area 2 or 3 and it's surrounded by 4s and 5s, that's what you want. You want it to be, if you imagine it as like a topography, you want it to be, you want the world to be pulling you up around, not pushed down. You don't. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's a really interesting point. Just to go back to the idea that you got your guy walking down the street, everything in his life costs the same, bar the cost of the house in Northampton, Nottingham, the northeast. Just go back to that a minute. I just want to point out that yes, we look at yield. Yes, we look at rents. Yes, we look at what the rent versus what we paid for the asset is. All really important. It works really well in these areas, by the way. But the biggest gain you will ever make in a property is the capital growth over the long term. Houses that I bought in Northampton and Nottingham, they've gone up by whatever they've gone up by. And when you divide that number into the months that I've owned it, the monthly capital gain, is more than the monthly rental profit. In lots of cases, it's more than the rent. So typical rent in Nottingham would be, anywhere between 500 and 800 pounds, because I've owned it for that long. Start off at 500, it's now 850, which rent, that's not rental profit, that's gross rent, yeah? Now, that property, when you work out what it's gone up by, so I bought some of them for 50 grand and they're now worth, I walked past the other one the other day, 250. I've started walking and walking and dictating. I walked past the house, I haven't been past that house for 10 years.
I know which part of Nottingham that's in, because I've got a couple there. And
that's worth 250 grand.
Growing up, we were scared to ride our bikes in that bit of Nottingham.
Yeah.
It had a reputation.
Yeah.
You didn't, when you hear all the years ago, remember 20 odd years ago, and there was lots of gun crime in Nottingham. It was between two rival gangs. One of those gangs was in that area, and you just wouldn't have gone there.
Yeah, and now it is. There's a very posh place in that's where he's from, in Nottingham, and this place is actually it's only about 2 miles away, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it started to get bigger and bigger and posher to the point where it's now
Gentrifying that bit.
It gentrifies that bit. Yeah. And that's what happens over time, and that's why that one. Yeah, all of them have gone up in that value. But yeah, just to go back to it, that the capital growth is the main thing, and I think that the northeast, and this is where you've got to make a decision. Yeah, is this right for you? If you want absolute, actually, it's not that, but it's not this wide a choice. You're only in there. It's somewhere between the East Midlands and the North East. It's not like massively different. But if you're looking for £150,000, a slightly different risk profile, because it is risky. Who knows when it's going to take off? I think it's going to take off in the next 2 to 5 years. What happens if there's another financial crisis and it dips a bit? Who knows? You have got to go into it with your eyes wide open. Some of these areas, they are at 2 or 3 now. There is a derelict steelworks next to it. And will it get done next month or next year or 10 years from now? It is a bit more risky. Of course it is. But when it goes, it's the one that's going to go the biggest, 100%. And another point that I just feel like we skipped over ever so slightly when we're talking about areas or regions, is it's not Nottingham, it's Mansfield. It's not Sheffield, it's Rotherham. It's not Newcastle, it's. So that's really important for you to know. When you're talking about regions and locations, so region, let's say it's Yorkshire. And Sheffield will get talked about. And when you're looking at tables on the internet or you do some research, the biggest places, they'll make the loudest noise about it, and it'll be the thing you'll find the most information about. we couldn't buy many deals in Sheffield right now. We've tried a few, there's been a few.
Yeah,
but
expensive.
It's expensive, and the yield isn't necessarily there. There's a lot of competition. If you go out a slightly further, you'd find places like Rotherham or Barnsley, or
Sure.
Barnsley's a bit further. And even we were in a place, we said it was Rotherham yesterday, but it wasn't, was it? Not yesterday, Wednesday when we drove up there. It was actually, it was a very small town. It was almost a village. Now, as a landlord, as an investor, you've got to decide where you want to invest and what you're comfortable and what you're happy with. But something I'm quite clear on as an opinion is the classic investor, I've got to be near a train station, a hospital, or a whatever, really doesn't stand true. It just, great if you are. That could be your tenant makeup. That could be a reason for investing. But you'll generally pay too much for the house.
Yeah.
And doctors, dentists, and doctors, nurses, and people who go to university, they're not the only people in the world. It's a tiny percentage, really. You don't have to think about your target market as a tenant. Tenants for everybody. 65% of the UK. When you're talking about sort of being near a train station, well, do you know what? I don't know many houses that aren't 5 minutes walk from a bus stop. I'm 5 minutes walk from a bus stop.
Yeah, I didn't buy my house with thinking about where the train station is.
No.
Yeah,
no.
exactly.
So that kind of thought process means that I don't need to be in Sheffield city centre. In actual fact, if I'm over there, it's a little bit nicer, it's a little bit cheaper, it's a little bit less rent. It works both beautifully. I can get in my car. Most of our tenants do have cars, and I can get on the motorway or get on that big arterial A road and get to the Amazon warehouse where I work, or the shopping centre where I work, or the out of town, whatever. That absolute needing to be in a city centre, that's not there. So when we talk about North East, it's not the big places. We're not in many of the big cities. It's the outlying little towns and not quite the villages yet, is it? So
Let's should we get the guys on?
let's get the guys on. Go on, you drive. Where I can't even see.
Right. So who should we have first? Who wants to go first, Andy or David?
David, come on, you were on first. And I can see. Oh, there's Andy. Anyway, I couldn't see where you were. Do I have to unmute? I have to unmute. How you doing? Oh, you can hear us. It's working. Very good. How are you? Yeah, very good. Very good.
So first, I've got a question for David. Right, so David, you've done many projects for us now. The typical single buy-to-let houses, the 2 and 3 bed houses. What specifically drives you to those little areas where you've been buying? Because it's not Newcastle, it's not close to any city centre of Newcastle, is it? What drives you to those parts?
Some of the areas we've been buying in is Stigam, Horton Spring, South Shield.
Yeah. Why there then, and not like really close to the Newcastle football ground or whatever?
We're closer to the city centre. Obviously, they're going to be more expensive. We tend to try and buy in areas of regeneration. We get better deals. Obviously through time, the growth is going to be there. We'll have all the best universities in the North East.
Yeah, all the smartest people in the North East, aren't they? All the smartest people.
In the UK, all the best in the UK is in North, through London, Sunderland, Durham, Newcastle universities. So it's attracting a lot of people into the cities.
So you're retaining students post graduation. They're staying in the region after they've studied there. Nottingham had that for years.
That's one of those stats that we
I didn't think of that. I didn't know that. See, I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't even be able to tell a client that. I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, I know that one, and that used to be the same as Nottingham, and it's not anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So the stat, just to make it clear for everybody on the call, is postgraduates staying on in, call it the North East, those areas after university. It's got one of the highest retention. Would retention be the right word? Stay on rates. Yeah. Nottingham used to have it. It's tailed off a bit. And it means that you've got population growth of smart people in the area, and that's definitely happening. Yeah.
A lot of them postgraduates, they don't live in the city centre. They live half an hour or 20 minutes out of the city centre.
Yeah,
So
great.
These are areas that we go to football.
Yeah, I think that is, because the numbers you're talking about, nearly doubling in 10 years, that's the small end of a hockey stick, because looking at these values, it just is. There has been, frankly, very little interest in the grand scheme of things from property investors. We've seen it over the last 10 years. People said it's too far away. We'll talk about too far away in a minute.
Yeah.
Too far away. It's got no capital growth. It's too focused on public sector rather than private. All of those things are reversing, and it's just getting going. Maybe the last 5 or 10 years, like you say, as soon as property prices in an area go over, and there's a couple of different thresholds. £50,000, £60,000, and £75,000 are different thresholds for lenders. Then you start getting landlords coming in, and then as soon as you're over 75,000, you get more owner-occupiers. It's to do with minimum loan values and minimum mortgageable values as well. So they get going, and that it gets going. It's like a fire being lit, and it just off it goes. And yeah, it's getting there now, isn't it? So,
Totally. Yeah. Right. Thanks, David.
Absolutely.
right, I've got
Very
it.
welcome.
Cheers, thank you.
Just before we
on,
bring Andy in,
on.
I just want to say, feel free to pop in any questions in the chat. Maybe people have been doing. We forgot to say at the start, I think.
Yeah,
But if you've got any questions at
in.
all,
Yeah, we
pop them in.
got questions.
It's a shorter webinar this week, I think, but maybe we will still have time for some Q&A, I think, yeah. Andy.
You've got to press the button to unmute. There you go. He's on it.
He's got it.
Hi. Good afternoon.
How are we doing?
We're doing really good, actually.
So
Yeah.
I've got a question I've thought of for Andy, because Andy, when he joined us, he'd been investing himself in that area. Why do you invest where you are, as opposed to somewhere else where you could travel a bit further?
Well, I think just local knowledge, really. I think the northeast. I particularly.
So just tell everyone where you're based in Middlesbrough. So I didn't tell everyone.
Well, Teesside.
Teesside.
Yeah, Middlesbrough, Stockton, Hartlepool, Billingham. They're sort of all, old industrial towns which are now moving to sort of new technology. You've got a lot of industry in and around Middlesbrough. Where the old steelworks have gone. So you've got new businesses and freeports taking off. So there's an influx of workers and new business. Even Hartlepool, you've got wind turbines. A lot of new technology and new industries. So there's a lot happening. And I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, certainly where I'm currently in Billingham, 50, 60 grand houses are now easily 110, 20 grand. So that's, with hindsight, if I knew that back then, we'd have bought a few more. But yeah, and it's like you said it earlier, they're sort of all very typical ex-council terraces, but solid houses which will continue to be solid, and tenants love them. They're very popular, and obviously rents are just moving up. Even a few years ago, something at 550 is the high end of 6, if not into the 700s now.
That's £700 a month for everybody. Yeah, £700 a month rent. Yeah.
Which, is if you'd said that to me 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't have.
No.
You could never take that on, really.
No, I agree with you completely. Logically, rationally though, going back to the guy that's getting out of his car, Sainsbury's shopping, etc., of course he can afford that. Whether he's renting it or even going to buy it, people can afford it. When the house in Nottingham is £250,000 and the house up near you is £100,000, and the same person type, same type of job, although it's very easy for the house value to go up very quickly. A house is not going to double from 250 to 500,000 as quick as from 75 to 150, because, well, less and less people can afford it. And this is probably a little bit glib because I know it's not totally true, but anybody can afford a £100,000 house. As long as
Anyone with a job.
With a job.
And who's mortgageable, hasn't got bad credit.
You just can't. National minimum wage, the way it is, anybody can afford a £100,000 house. Now, in actual fact, you could even put it a little bit more strongly than that. anybody could afford a £75,000 house or 150. What's the difference, really?
Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of
It's not
mortgageability,
massive.
it's not massive. You probably have to, shop at Aldi, not Sainsbury's, and that'd be it. That could be the difference. So, when you see prices go, we've talked quite a bit about identifying a region and an absolute location, and then maybe even the street and the house. We'll talk about that in a minute. Really getting down to a granular level.
Can I ask Andy the question on that?
Yeah, go.
So, if you want to work with us and you want, one of these guys to source you a house, you book a call with me and we'll talk you through the process and everything. And then Andy this week has, we take a buy-to-let order from a client, and then we go out and find the house that matches the client's order. Andy's done that this week with their client. It was 34k, wasn't it, Andy? Didn't
Actually, 33.
33. But you offered like 31 at first. Just you negotiated up. But what was the kind of conversations you were having with our client David on that one? Different David, obviously. When you're showing this to him at first, what was your first conversation like? Because it sounds really cheap, doesn't it? It can scare a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to be careful because sometimes it is too good to be true. But I'm familiar with the area. We bought in and around that area before. I think it was timing and circumstances regarding the vendor situation.
Okay, so there's a bit of that in it, right? Yeah.
So yeah, it needs a fair bit of work doing, but it's nothing structural. It can be done within 8 weeks, and we know what the end valuation is.
Well, that's my question, right? So you guys are sourcing and renovation managers. You can accurately price that renovation. The price that you've quoted for the renovation, it's broken out in an Excel document, and that will honour that price for that list of works. But how confident are you that it's going to be, how much are you spending on it and how much is it going to be worth after, and how confident are you that it will be worth that?
So we're spending about 22,000 and it should be worth about 75,000 once complete.
And we've got, and obviously I'm assuming, because I haven't even had a chance to look yet, because David, the client's approved all of this, you've shared with him a comparable report, right? So you've got live data that shows other houses that are being sold for that, right?
Yeah, and we've got a fair idea what it'll rent for as well. Again, we've rented similar houses in similar locations in the last few weeks, so there's a good degree of certainty there that the numbers are absolutely
fantastic.
Yep, that one.
So that means our client will be probably all into that for in 60 grand or something.
Yeah,
60ish K.
Yeah.
Once paid out, we charge a fee for sourcing and renovating a house, £6,000 plus VAT. The client's paying us for Andy to find him that house and manage that renovation. Happy to talk that fees anytime with anyone. Brilliant, thanks Andy.
Yeah, well done. Cheers, thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah, with that house there, it's great today, but finishing off that last point, it will go from that value
to 150,
quicker than anything else, and it's good for yield. Capital growth generally in the country will make you the most out of anything, but this particular property in this particular area, this is why it's a hot spot for us, factoring that in, is the one that's going to go to 75 to 150 as quick as anything else, and whereas 150 to 300 is a lot harder. Something that struck me while Andy was talking there, just listen to the valuation, the purchase price and the cost of the works. Spending almost a third of the cost on that.
33 grand for the house, 22 to renovate it. Amazing.
Yeah, so something you would have to wrap your head around and be comfortable with as an investor in these areas is, for example, when the boiler breaks, it could be 2.5% of the value of the house to replace it.
Which, that just shows you how crazy the valuation
it does show you exactly how crazy it is. It can't be. Persimmon Homes can't build it for that.
No.
If you were to take this, Andy, that 38 grand house, if you take it apart brick by brick and sell off the bricks, you get your money back almost. it's particularly you've got to be careful. I mean, some of the renovations that we did on the old Nottingham stuff,
Yeah.
we used to spend on a full renovation, and this is going back 15,
Yeah, I
16,
know.
17 years.
Crazy.
We were paying £6,000, £7,000, 8,000 for a renovation,
Yeah.
and we'd call it the whole lot. But even then, we were mindful of the fact that you can't spend so much. You know,
But that's why you've got to be
because the value. Yeah.
That's why working with us, and you know, Andy's priced that renovation, and he's provided an Excel document that breaks that renovation down to the penny.
Yeah.
So we know that 22 grand isn't going to turn into 32 grand to 40 grand, and it's priced
important,
accurately, and everything that's factored in is what needs doing.
I've just remembered something.
What's that?
I mean, we don't do this anymore, and I'm semi-ashamed that we did. We used to bring the cost of the renovation down because it was so tight. We didn't used to put carpets in.
What did you put in then?
Nothing. We just did floorboards. So tenants would, which is actually a thing that councils do around here,
right.
and it was quite a common thing.
Not,
we
not
stopped.
in the time I've been working with you.
No, that was right at the beginning. And then we started putting down jumbo cord without underlay. Can you remember those days?
No,
Yeah.
that was before my time, mate.
Our standards
Things have got a lot better since I joined.
much higher.
I've been here 8 years and we've not been doing that.
Oh no, it was quite long before that. There was we got people in and they took over the renovations and they made them a lot better than I did.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
I don't think that
Good.
that wouldn't happen anymore. So, but yeah, that's that cost of the renovation has got to be really. Coming back to that, I was going to say, now some of those houses we did in Nottingham, we've had to renovate them. They're 15 years later, 17 years later, but they've got a different specification of renovation. Back then, it was cheap and cheerful because it was a cheap and cheerful house. Now it's a
and it rented for about 350 quid a month.
Exactly that, yeah. So it was a different thing, and that's actually we're slightly above that. We don't go down as grotty in the northeast as I did in Nottingham at the time, but when you re-renovate it, 15 years later maybe, it's a nice kitchen, nicer bathroom. I have spent some more money on it.
And you're actually not spending any real money on renovating it because you've got it out of a refinance probably.
Yeah. Exactly.
Have we got many questions, Lauren? I'm just concerned about time.
You start getting the questions up. Give us however many minutes we've got. We want to talk about de-risking it. 15 minutes. So I want to talk about the de-risking these areas. And as always, the way to de-risk something is knowledge, is to know what you're doing. It's only risky if you don't understand what you're getting into. Once you get into it, you can manage things, you can price things right, you can understand the risks, so I'm not only going to go that far or one way or the other. First thing, I'll kind of a gateway into this conversation is how far is too far to manage a property portfolio? Because if you feel it's too far, that's going to amplify the risk. I've got a thought on that. I would imagine most people on this call, maybe some people do live in the northeast and they need some help. We work with clients that live in the northeast and they want to buy in the northeast, but they just haven't got time. That's a whole separate conversation. But most generalisation, but most capital is south and it wants to be deployed up north. I mean, of course, there's loads of rich people up north as well. But but generally speaking, we speak to clients who that's the way it's going, and they say, "How far's too far?" My answer is, if you can't drive there yourself, don't matter if it's 100 miles away or 300 miles away.
Similar question. So a guy I spoke to said to me, he lived near London, and I'd been thinking, I'll buy Nottingham because it feels closer, I could drive to it. I said, well, I understand that. It makes perfect sense why you've come to that idea, but you won't ever drive to it.
Nope.
I said, I've got houses in Nottingham that I never drive past. I have to drive past the road where we own a house on the same road, to drive past that every day. I never take a left just to go up there and drive past it.
And if you did, what would you do? You'd see a house.
Exactly, they all look the same.
Well, and you see, it doesn't look like it's... Unless it was on fire on that minute.
As long as you've got a good person to manage it locally, and someone who can be doing the inspections and the relet and the marketing and all of that sort of stuff, and organising your gas certificates, don't matter.
I noticed, when I was in Nottingham buying here to start off with, I only had one employee, and the point when we started buying, not even Derby, but a little bit closer, Ilkeston around that way, was the point when I found it too far to be bothered to drive on a Saturday afternoon, for example, to do those things. Not far away at all. So the message is, if you want to grow, you're going to need help. You're going to need a letting agent. Unless you want to be available 24/7, 365, gen up on all the legislation, and it's just too risky not to have a letting agent. A letting agent will keep it full, will minimise the voids, will keep the rent topped up, and will protect you from all those risks. They pay for themselves. I know I'm biased because I own a letting agent, but I own a letting agent because I don't want to do that work myself. And it's the risk that is growing. Every year there's more and more legislation, and we get about, personally as a landlord, not as the letting agency, I get 5 or 6 a month at the moment. Letters from councils, we're coming to inspect this, we're coming to do that. And before I had a really good letting agent looking after this, those used to give me heart palpitations. It's like an HMRC letter or a speeding fine or something. You think this is going to cost me thousands of pounds. I got one this morning. I just sent it over to Pav, and it's just dead done. I'm fine for the council to go in and do those inspections because I know it will be fine. So having a letting agency look after it is really important to de-risk things. The next way to de-risk it is right house, decent safe home. We talk about the standards.
The renovation standard, you can Google this, DASH, it's a standard, it's a landlord accreditation scheme in the East Midlands. All the renovations we do are done to the DASH standard. It stands for decent and safe home. It's a high lettable standard that actually is above the minimum expectations for a landlord licence. You get a discount if you're a DASH landlord in Nottingham. That's what we do. The renovation Andy talked about, 22 grand. That's pretty much a full renovation now. Yeah. That'll be a full rip out, a new kitchen, new bathroom, most likely a full rewire, if not an extensive electrical upgrade, new central heating. Probably some bit of roof works in there, some windows. We'll make sure that it's got child restrictors on the windows, fire opening, all of those sorts of things. Interlinked fire alarms, smoke alarms, heat detecting, carbon monoxide alarms, all the compliance stuff you've got to be aware of. Yeah.
Now, as Adam's reeling that off and people's eyes are glazing over, and you don't want to be involved in that.
I was just saying, I didn't even have that written down.
It's very impressive. It's almost like you know what you're talking about. It's something that 10 years ago I would have felt very uncomfortable, probably at 15 hopefully, very uncomfortable in my own knowledge. I'd either have been, 15 years ago, I'd probably been ignorant.
Yeah.
And then there was a period like, oh God, we've really got to take all this stuff seriously because it's coming out of the woodwork. We call them hand grenades. I call them hand grenades. It's that hassle. It's the boom, I've got this letter and I don't know how to deal with it. And they're going to fine me. There's going to be a rent repayment order. There's going to be a fine. Some of these things you go to prison for. I mean, I don't think that's on the cards for us because we're a long way away from that. But for some landlords that we meet, it definitely could be. Nowadays, it's just handled. There's a CRM system, it's got safety certificates in it and diarised things and bits of paperwork that are just perfect. Immaculate is the word that Craig uses. It's just immaculate and it reduces the risk. So the right house to a decent and safe standard is going to stop you getting fined and all those things. Right house, right area, pay the right price. The guys have talked about what the right area is. Then you renovate it to the right standard. Put the right tenant in there, use the right paperwork, and look after it, the right long-term management. I think there's a few other things, probably a bit too much for today, but if you're going to truly get to grips with things and de-risk everything, there's other stuff you need to think about as well. Part of that is having the right mortgage.
Yeah.
Having the wrong mortgage or not having the right people to draw on, you can find yourself drifting into the wrong rates or the wrong loan to values, and that's a risk. Having people to call on for tax advice or a party wall surveyor. I'm talking about just getting a team of experts and good people around you, so you're always prepared when something unexpected comes around. That's knowledge is power, and getting that Rolodex of people sat in your database of people you can call on if something happens makes things feel a lot more relaxed. That's what we're here for.
Indeed it is.
Questions?
Book a
Go on,
call. I
Thomas.
think Lauren's been putting links to my calendar. You can book a call with me. Choose a time that suits you.
What questions have we got? And have we missed anything off the agenda?
I don't
We're
think
all
so.
right? Done?
Yeah.
Okay. And
There's your chat.
my goodness,
Make
I
that
can't read
big.
that. I can't read that.
You can. Yeah, I can.
Can you? You have to read that out.
Right.
You have made the text
Go
bigger.
back to the top.
Go on.
Right. Okay. Let's have a look. Does the value of the house also increase, or are you focusing on yield? No. We're looking for capital growth and a good return, good yield as well.
I think there's two sides to the capital growth. One, the area itself is regenerating, gentrifying. Gentrifying is too strong a word. It's a steelwork's been knocked down and some really nice houses been put back in their place. Is going to do a massive thing for the area.
Yeah.
But and that's why we're there. We're there for the yield first, because yes, it's cheaper and the rents are about the same, so the yield's better. Then we're buying an area that's regenerating, it's going up. But more than that, because they're a 75 grand house, they'll pop up to 150 quicker than the 150 will go to a 300. Yeah. And that is the one-off bump. That's the story. That's the thing you'll tell people 10 years, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Corby was the idea. When I say I bought in Northampton, buying in Corby, Northamptonshire is quite a way away, but it was a steel town, closed down. It was on its knees for 20 years.
Things are expensive then.
And then, oh god, geez, it's £500,000 now. I could buy those houses for £15,000. I didn't buy enough.
Yeah.
But when I really started buying there, I was paying 50 grand, 40, 50 grand, and they're
So yes, the value does increase, and if you're working with us, then my sourcing manager, who you've seen on the call, will talk you through all of that. I think Geordie again, cost of me finding you the house, please. Sounds good with your knowledge and skills. So if it's straight up sourcing your house, doesn't require any renovation, you're just going to buy it with a mortgage, £3,000 most likely. If we're going to manage a renovation on it, £6,000 to source and then manage the renovation. We factor our fee in to all the associated purchase costs, and it's factored into a spreadsheet that details all the numbers. Happy to have a chat with you, more detail about that. Just book a chat with me by following the link. Richard's just apologising for poor internet. No worries. There will be a recording next week on YouTube. We drop the webinars on the YouTube channel a week after we've recorded them, so you'll have that. If you might not be on the call anymore,
booked in your diary. There you go.
Okay, good. And is there anyone else? You've got some direct ones. Go on.
Geordie also said, can you get a mortgage for 40 grand? What if you wanted to buy / set up a limited company?
Okay, so
two separate questions.
Two questions. Can you get a mortgage for a 40 grand house? No.
Nope.
It's too cheap, so it won't meet the minimum buy-to-let loan. Usually the minimum loan for a buy-to-let mortgage is 65. About, I think 40, maybe for you, because your portfolio, large portfolio landlords get different criteria, but typically it was always 40. So the client who bought that cheap house in Middlesbrough, by the time we've renovated it and added the value, he can then put the mortgage on and get his money back out that way. That's how he's doing it. He's buying it in cash, he's renovating, and then he's going to refinance at the higher value. What was the other part of the question?
Setting up a limited company.
Again, that's probably a question I could answer in more detail on a call. But if you're planning on growing a sizable portfolio, it's most likely going to be more beneficial to you to do it inside a limited company. Best to get proper accountant advice, which I can put you in touch with someone. But most likely, most people are doing it.
Definitely investigate it.
Yeah.
It probably is right. You can't say yes or no.
But without knowing your personal
90% sure, yes. Actually, you sort of say 90%, maybe 85%, but but definitely have the conversation. Same with tax.
Yeah.
There are a dozen or so different levers in buy-to-let, and if you get them all 2% right, you're way up in the stratosphere. If you get them 2% wrong, you're in the mediocre stuff. One of them is mortgages, mortgage rates, buying the right houses, all the things we've been talking about. Tax, I think, is the big one, because that's why you'd go limited company.
Yeah,
because you've definitely got people out there that have done almost everything right, and then they're paying almost all of the extra gain that they've done by doing things right out in tax. And I don't mind paying tax. I'm a conscientious citizen, but it's got to be the right amount, and it keeps us in business. Otherwise, we're not there to provide the decent and safe homes for the tenants.
Yeah, exactly. What's the other question?
Anthony said, details. The North East is where I have my major portfolio and looking to increase it, but he's booked a one-to-one. So.
Okay.
Oh, all right,
Yeah,
thanks,
have a talk,
Anthony.
have a
Yeah,
chat.
feel free to get a list of questions for me for when we have that one-to-one, and I'll happily answer them all.
Yeah. We'd love to balance the portfolio and help you source some more properties. Yeah. Did Anthony say that's where he has it? He's not where,
Said
not where he
he's
lives.
got a
but it's where
portfolio
he's got-
already.
Yeah. Which, something just popped into my mind. Has it just gone again? We've talked. This was the northeast, and some people are tempted to go all in. I'm just reminded of a couple of different clients recently who, when you were talking about, I'm a portfolio landlord, and when we speak to the mortgage broker Charlotte, she's always keen to point out how I'm not think differently, but how I'm a bit different, I'm a bit further on, and we've got to bring it back to people who are maybe buying their first property or their third, fourth, fifth, or just thinking about buying the first one. It might not be for everybody. It might be that buying something very simple, a vanilla box in Nottingham might be
It's
right.
not for everyone, and that's
It's
fine.
not for everybody,
I've got a
absolutely.
client who we're working with at the minute who has got 100k. He wants to buy 2 houses in Nottingham or Derby with a mortgage that are already ideally tenanted or tenant ready. He doesn't do any renovation work. He doesn't want to do anything. It's just not for him. And the conversation we have is not me trying to say to him, "Oh no, but come on, you should really think about maximising that 100 grand." But he doesn't want to do it. So we can go and find him 2 nice mortgageable houses. He'll do well. He'll make a monthly cash flow, and he'll still get a capital growth. It will be slower because he won't be building in any equity at the start, and he's aware of that and he's happy with that, so it's fine.
Yeah. And who are we to say what's right for everybody? I believe in property generally, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? Hopefully we're giving you a flavour of the northeast, but don't let it be the be all and end all.
Yeah, I can see Geordie's put where's your YouTube video. If you just go on our YouTube, you can paste it in. Yeah, if you just, Oh, he's got it.
Yeah.
He's got it, yeah.
We're cool for the landlords on YouTube.
Yeah, we should probably put that link out there.
Quite a few of your clients I've noticed are buying in multiple areas. And we said we talk about spreading risk, and that would be one way to spread a risk. I do. Interestingly, when you start spreading your risk like that, and I found it interesting. So you're buying one here, one there, all over the country, which I feel I can do. I've got a letting agency that can look after, they can property manage that. We've got hubs in those areas, we've got boots on the ground in those areas, property managers who can look after them. It's no drama to me to manage a property in Derby, Nottingham, Northampton or Newcastle, just the same. I don't manage any of them, somebody else does. You pick what you think you're going to pick, and I'm happy to buy them all for different reasons. And I'm pretty good at working out what's what and where I think it's going to end up being. I'm always surprised that some of the ones you think, that's going to explode. And or I'm not sure if I overpaid for that. Just there's a little bit. When I'm talking about that, there's only a tiny little difference really. And I've trained myself just to go, if it feels about right, it's right. Because over the long term it'll go. But whatever my prediction was, the ones that surprise you, I never expected. Should I have bought that one? I don't know. And then 5 years later, bloody hell, that's my best performer. And I think by spreading your risk that way, because honestly, as long as you get it about right, it'll be right. Can you predict it absolutely exactly? No, you can't. And some of the ones that I think, that's a bit of a damp squid, I'm convinced that 5 years from now will explode again. Who knows? But as long as you get it about right, and I think knowing about the northeast is a thing in your toolkit as a landlord. So
There we are.
done. Happy.
All right, finished on
That's
time.
great. We finished on time.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Amazing. Well, thank you, people.
thank you
Thank you,
very
everybody, for joining the call and staying. Feel free to give me a shout.
Bye for now.
See you
Enjoy
soon.
your afternoon and weekend.
Bye.